Welcome to another episode of the Reloop Brief. I'm Barry Snedden. This time we're heading to Ireland to check in on how the country's deposit return system is performing after the first 2 years. We'll hear from Ciaran Foley from Return, the DMO, about the scheme's progress so far, including how overall collection rates are now topping 90% and the sharp decline in litter that's being observed across the country. We're also taking a look at what comes next, improving convenience, boosting consumer engagement, supporting community funding and addressing some of the questions that have emerged around unredeemed deposits and the future of things like digital payment options. We start with the news that 2.5 billion beverage containers have been collected in the first 2 years of the system.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, just over 2 years in, as you say, we're delighted with how Ireland has picked up the scheme. After a relatively slow start, which I guess is to be expected, we've made remarkable progress and people have got used to it and Ireland is getting on with it, which is great.
One of the stats that I read recently was the overall collection rates for containers is now over 90%.
Yeah, that's kind of an important differential there. So we're about 76, 77% through the DRS. And we estimate about 15% still going through the mixed dry recycling. You know, it's worth noticing that we have a privatised mixed dry recycling environment here in Ireland, you know, which obviously was working pretty well. I think our recycling rate of our containers was about 49% before the DRS, which comparatively speaking isn't bad, but obviously wasn't good enough and we need to get to 90. So there's still about 15% going through the mixed dry recycling. So overall, we're probably 91, 92% at this stage.
Litter stats are also very encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we had an Irish Business Against Litter survey. I think we've had 3 of them done now since we went live. The first survey showed a 50% reduction relatively quickly. That stabilised in the second one. And then the most recent one, which was just done a few months ago, shows a 60% reduction. And probably important to say the way that survey is done is it measures a very large number of locations. But if there's even one bottle or can in that location, it's still considered littered. So, you know, the reductions could be significantly more than that. But there's 60% of the locations that they're inspecting that has absolutely no bottles or cans. So that's great. And we've had a lot of feedback from tidy towns, and Coastwatch are sort of talking about the cleanest beaches we've seen for 25 years. So overall, we think the impact on litter is really good.
And what lies in the future then? I mean, I've heard all sorts of different things about new recycling plants. I've heard a bit about expansion into the smaller islands and harder to reach communities. But what is next for you?
Yeah, well, a lot of the immediate future is certainly all around convenience and trying to improve redemption. You know, the 15% that's still in the mixed dry recycling, we obviously need to get that into the separate collection system. And there's the challenges out and about for the on-the-go material. Ireland is a very large consumer of the smaller, below 500ml PET bottles. So that's definitely a challenge. So, you know, bulk machines, other things around coverage and convenience is really the short-term goals. In terms of building the recycling plants, well, we do now have enough material in one place to make it economically viable to do so. So that's always been a stated ambition of Return. And yeah, we're talking to a number of businesses about the opportunities there. But for now, it's really about improving the overall redemption.
And how are you going to do that?
Well, lots of ideas, I guess. I think most of it is around education, really. I think Ireland has adapted really well, but we do a lot of research that tells us a lot of people still don't understand the benefits of separate collection over mixed dry recycling. You know, the fact that we're achieving 98% quality of recyclate, which obviously allows all of the bottles to be going bottle to bottle, the whole kind of essence of the circular economy. I still think a lot of people don't fully understand that. Lots of people are using the scheme because they've paid the deposit and they want to get that back. Lots of people use it for environmental reasons. There's a huge amount of community activity in Ireland, so lots of people are using it really around supporting their local schools or clubs, etc. But we do believe that there are a lot of people who kind of cash rich, time poor people who don't understand the full benefits of the scheme. So I think a lot of it is really about education. But then, as I said, you know, the rollout of more bulk machines and making things more convenient for the public in general is obviously very important too.
I think convenience is one of the strongest things, really, isn't it? We've got research to back that up too. You mentioned the community aspect and the fact that you're able to donate your deposit on refund to charity. That's going really well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there's a number of elements to that, really. I think the standout for us is when we went live, we had a few community activities contact us and say if we sent them out bins and bags that they would collect bottles and cans and bring them back to retail and raise money for their own organisations. And we started sending out bins and bags to 10, 20, 30 community organisations. That number now sits at 4,700, which is incredible. So we have a huge group of ambassadors out there who've recognised that the positive essence around recycling can be backed up by also raising funds for their causes and for their communities. And, that helps us greatly because it puts a very positive slant on the whole scheme in general, and people feel they're doing something good over and over, if you like. So yeah, that's been a really kind of Irish solution to an Irish problem, and we clearly want to grow that and maintain that as best we can.
There was a story in the news just before Christmas, I think it was, and it was about the possibility of having refunds at some point direct to your bank account. Has there been any development there?
Yeah, not really. We know that the capability is there. We're very mindful of the investment that retailers have made, to be honest, Barry, in terms of getting the scheme up and running. And obviously the return to retail model where you get your voucher and most people tend to spend that in store is advantageous to the retailers. And we don't want to do anything that kind of breaks that relationship at this stage. I think we sort of want to give them enough time to recoup their investment. I do feel it's something that we do need to look at, and we have looked at in the background. We've worked with the banks, with the pillar banks and others, and we know the solution is there, but we're not in a rush to get it out there because we're hitting our targets. Things are going very well. So you mentioned we've put the charity option on the machine. So that was something that wasn't available when we first went live, but that is now, and the majority of machines out there now have a donate to charity option, which works for everybody, I think. So we'll probably progress things like that before we get to the full digitalisation solution.
Now, there's been a couple of things in the news, I guess, and things that have come up when I've been out and about at different conferences. There was a story a while back, and it wasn't a surprise to me to hear a bit about unredeemed deposits. It was portrayed in quite a negative light, and I just wonder if you wanted to expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, that's so important that we communicate well and that we educate people about, I guess, firstly, the not-for-profit status of the organisation. People do have a right to know what's happening to the money that isn't being redeemed. I think when people understand that it does sit with us as a not-for-profit, it doesn't go back to producers or it doesn't go to government or anywhere else. And then I think if we can explain sort of our ethos and what we would ultimately do with any excess unredeemed deposits if there was any. So firstly, explaining how the scheme works and the fact that a certain amount of unredeemed deposits is obviously built into our long-term financial model, and that is expected and that is normal. But if there's any excess, we've certainly agreed that would be invested back into the circular economy. And ultimately, the financial model is about improving circularity in Ireland. So, but you can imagine, and I think you can fully understand, that people don't know that. They're not into the detail of how that works, and they have a right, I think, to know. So again, I would put it down to education. We're out there at the moment talking about this very publicly. And I think as long as the Irish people get a handle on where the money is going, then that will be a much more positive discussion going forward.
I guess the big question, Ciaran, is what else is next? Maybe this is a good opportunity to use.
Yeah, look, I think we've got to be very cognizant of the fact that we are only 2 years old. I think there's definitely issues in certain pockets in cities where people are going into the bins to take out what is now a valuable commodity. And most people, we've seen that all over Europe, and you'll be familiar with that, Barry, but most people do that in a very respectful way. But there are some challenges where people are leaving litter behind them. So we want to work particularly with Dublin County Council at the moment, but anywhere else where that's a problem, to solve things like that. I think we keep touching on it, but communication and education is really important. We know the positive impact that the scheme is having. So once you get into a conversation like this or any other conversation, I think it helps just to spread that word and to show people how positive it can be, and what an example, I guess, of the success of the circular economy that deposit return schemes across Europe or across the world generally are, So, yeah, I think that's pretty much where we're at.
You just touched on it there as well. The fact that any things that come up, these are things that are understood, potentially expected, and have been overcome in different areas. And you mentioned other systems in other places. Everybody's sort of working together on the same solution here, aren't they?
That's exactly it, yeah. I sit on the board of the European DRS Association, so we discuss these challenges all the time. And as you say, we're not encountering things that others haven't encountered, and it's about looking at the overall effect of the scheme. We've touched on everything from carbon emission savings to litter to recycling rates, etc., and understanding how things can be overcome. But I think the scheme is to be celebrated. I think from an Irish perspective, we've adapted really, really quickly, and it's a very positive story. So exactly your point, I think the more we can talk about it, the more we can feed off that positivity.
Ciaran Foley from Return in Ireland speaking to us on the Reloop Brief. Now, for more episodes of this podcast, check out reloopplatform.org, where you can subscribe or follow for details on future episodes as well.